Hey guys, welcome back to the next episode of the Weekly Coder. I'm Chris, and in this episode we are going to continue on with Conway's Game of Life. What we're going to do is we are going to make it so that we can save our patterns that we create. And in order to do that, well, let me back up a little bit. And let's just kind of go ahead and play with what we've got. What we have here is our grid that we created, and then basically we set it up so that we can get mouse input from the player, right? So whenever you click somewhere, it's going to activate a cell, okay? So you click again and the cell is deactivated. So from this point, you may want to be able to save your work, right? So let's say you're doing this like really elaborate pattern and it takes you, a good 5 minutes to draw. Even something that takes you a minute to draw. Anything that takes longer than a few seconds, I think is worth saving, right? So to do that, you can, there's several ways to do that. The way that we're going to do it is, in my opinion, maybe the most efficient way. Or maybe that's not maybe the right word. Maybe I'm looking for the cleanest way, and also the most scalable way, right? Because we could easily throw this into a text file and store a bunch of ones and zeros based on the grid. And if a cell is alive, we set it a 1. If the cell is dead, we set a 0. Since the cells only have 2 states, this will be easy to make. And even if they had 3 states, we could have a 0, 1, and a 2. And, for every number there is, we could have a different type of, if there were different types of... Anyways, I'm getting off topic here. So, that can definitely be stored in a flat file. But if we have any other attributes that we would like to save as part of this game, or part of the pattern itself, then our flat file is going to run into some issues because it's limited to storing the data of our grid, right? If we wanted to add anything else in there, then we would have to worry about adding delimiters and making sure that we knew where to parse certain information from, and it can get really messy really quick. So in my opinion, the best way to handle this situation is to create a class for our pattern. And we can use something called serialization. And if you've never heard of serialization before, basically what that is, it's taking an object and turning it into a byte stream that can then be used to export into a file or something else. And basically for storage to use then later on, right? So basically we're taking our object and we're serializing it into bytes and saving it to disk. So then on the reverse part of that would be then to deserialize, right? So let's say we have this file with all this data that's an object. We then deserialize it and bring it back in, and then we have our object and that we can then instantiate. So the best way to tackle that then is we're going to have to create a class for our pattern, okay? So what we'll do is we'll go to create C# script, and we'll just call this pattern. And what we'll need to do is we're still going to store our zeros and ones based on the where they are in the grid. So this would be a 0, 0, 0, 0, zeros all the way until we reach here. Then we get a 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, and so on. Okay, we're still going to store that. We're going to store that as a string variable of just ones and zeros and ones, okay? So let me go ahead and open up this pattern class, and the class itself isn't going to do a whole lot. It's literally just going to have a property in it, and that property is going to be a string, and we're just going to call this pattern string. And that's going to represent and basically hold all of the zeros and ones. So we're not going to be needing any namespaces here. We're going to get rid of those, and there we go. Our class is now 4 lines of code. We're also not going to inherit from mono behavior. That is not necessary. Okay, so we've got our class called pattern, and a pattern class has a variable property called pattern string, which is set to public so that we can access that. Alright, so let's go ahead and close that out. So in order for us to serialize this object, okay, the first thing that we're going to want to do is well, I guess the other thing that we did is we started our, we added the pause and the build, right, to our simulation so that we can press B to build, whoops, or not, something's happening here. It's not happy about something. Let's clear the log. It's very possible that... Okay. So, yeah, we can press B, which will build, and start to run our simulation. We can press P, which pauses our simulation. So from here, we already have the basic functionality in place to stop and start the simulation, and by default it's stopped. So the next thing we'll need to do is we need to actually decide how we're going to handle the saving and the serialization of our pattern class, and also how we're going to grab all the data off of our grid. So I'm going to say that all of this should be done in the game class. Okay, so now if we think about how we're going to go about saving this, is the first thing we should do is we should create a method, and I'm just going to put this below the update method here, and let's just call this, let's make private so we don't need to access it outside the class. We're going to call this save pattern. It's not going to take any parameters because we don't need it. And let's see. We're going to need a way to create, or to, basically we're going to need to set a directory where we're going to save our pattern files in. So I'm just going to call this patterns. So what that's going to do is it's going to look and, well, right now it's not going to do anything. But this is going to be where our patterns are going to be stored in a folder called patterns. And that is going to live basically in the root of our project. So in order to create a directory, it's actually pretty simple. I think we need to include, though, the system.io. So let's go up to using system.io so that we can do input-output operations. And we're also going to need system.xml xml.serialization, because we're going to use XML serialization. And basically all that means is that the class that we're going to use to do the serialization, the output of that is going to be in an XML format. So the next thing that we need to do here is we need to actually check to see if our directory already exists, because the directory is going to be created by the software, right? So we're going to say if not directory dot exists, and then we're just going to specify path, okay, because it's going to check from the root of our project folder, right? That's already, you know, given. It's going to start there, and it's going to go patterns. If you were to do this, it would not start at the root of our project. It would start at the root of your drive, and then it would be root patterns. So here you want to start in a project, and then inside the project there will be a pattern folder. Now if that does not exist, we're going to create it using that same directory class. We're going to create directory and specify the path. So it's going to create patterns. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is we're going to want to instantiate an instance of our pattern class, the one that we are going to serialize, the one that has the pattern string as a property. We're going to also create a pattern string as a variable here, and we're going to set that equal to null. And that's going to temporarily hold our data from our array. And the way that we're going to get data into that array is we're going to iterate over what we have. So we're going to use a for loop, and we're going to iterate over y. We're going to start out at 0. Then we're going to say y is less than screen height, because we only want to go up to screen height. And then we're going to increment y. Whoops. And then we're also going to put another for loop in here and increment over x. Start at 0. X is less than screen width. Oops. If I could spell. And x++. So from here, all we need to do is we need to check to see if grid x y dot is alive, because remember our grid is of type cell, and cell has a property called isAlive that we set when we activate the cell. And we say if that's false, then our pattern string plus equals 0. So basically what we're doing by using plus equals is we are adding, or sorry, not adding, but we are appending to the string that is already there. If this were an integer, then we would add whatever it was on the other side to whatever the variable already holds. So if it's not false, meaning that it is alive, then we want to store, or we want to append to our pattern string a 1. Okay. So this is going to run until we've iterated over the entire screen of, horizontal and vertical. And then all we need to do is we need to go in and say pattern dot pattern string. And pattern string is that property that's in the pattern class, which is the instance that we're working with right now. And we're going to set that equal to pattern string. Okay, so now here comes the fun part. We are going to need to instantiate XML Serializer. And that is here. And we'll just call this Serializer to keep things simple. And then we're just going to grab new XML Serializer. And we're going to tell it what type of serialization we're going to do, and that's going to be of type pattern. Okay. The next thing is we need to create a string, or stream writer object. And with the stream writer, we are going to specify where it's going to stream write. So we're going to do, let's see, this will be the name of the file. So we could start out with actually the path and append a slash, and let's just call this test.xml. Alright. So the next thing then is to take that serializer instance and serialize our object. So we'll do writer dot base stream pattern. Okay. So then writer, the base stream, we're going to set the contents of the pattern object equal to that, right? And that's going to write out to the test.xml file. And finally, what we can do here is we can say writer.close. And that is a method, so we do that. So that should save everything that's on our screen to this test.xml file. So just as, you know, just so you guys can see what's going on, I'm going to debug this to the console. So we can do debug.log, and we're going to debug out the pattern string. So when we click save, two things will happen. Well, a couple things will happen. Number one, it's going to check and see, it's going to set this path equal to patterns. It's going to check and see if that directory exists. If it doesn't, we're going to create it. Then we're going to basically create an instance of the pattern class, and we are going to iterate over the screen. We're going to set we're going to add a 0 for every time a cell is alive or dead, and a 1 for every time a cell is alive. Then we're going to set that equal to the pattern string property on the pattern class instance. Then we're going to create a new serializer object, type of pattern. We're going to tell it where and what the file that it's going to be written to. Then we're going to take that writer instance. We're going to add that into the serialize method along with our pattern object. And then we're going to close the writer. And finally, we're going to output the pattern string to the console so you guys can see what that looks like. So all of that is done. Now we just need to assign a button to the save pattern class, our method. So what we'll do here is we've got B and P. So let's use S input.getKeyUp. Key code .s and save pattern. Save pattern. Okay. So we'll save that, and then we're going to come into Unity and click play. So here we have this. Now if we look in the console, there's nothing. So we're going to go ahead and press the S button. Alright. So now I see that not just did we actually output all of this. Now that just looks like a whole bunch of zeros to you, right? But that's actually more than that, because if we click on this, you can see the entire contents of it. So you'll see we've got just a whole bunch of zeros here, right? 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, until we get to this. Then we've got a 1, a 1, and a 1, which equals these. And then we've got another 0, and then we've got 3 1s, and then we've got some zeros, and then a 1, 1, and then a 0, and then a 1, and then a 0, and a 1, and a 0, and a 1, and a bunch of zeros. And then further down the line, we've got 3 1s again, a 0, and 3 1s. So there we go. Now let me show you guys what the actual file looks like, because it actually saved it here. This is the folder, Conway's Game of Life, Part 6. We have our assets folder here, library, logs, object, packages, and here's the patterns folder it created. Now if we open that up, we've got a file in there called test.xml. If we open that, let's open that with Sublime. Now I'm going to drag this over, and that is what that looks like. Okay, so it's XML version 1, and then you can clearly see here that this is pattern right here. That's the name of the class. And then we've got pattern string, which is the property that we created. Right? So this all looks great. This all looks exactly the way we want it to look. So the next thing to do, I guess, would be to create the load method. Alright guys, so that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like and comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe. Also, check out my Patreon. I upload all of my source code and all the projects there for these videos so that you guys can follow along or download as you see fit. And I will see you guys in the next one.